to save this hurt this days. Put on your cape and learn the phrase. It's TA with MK. It's TA with MK.
Hello, and hello. Welcome back to another episode of TA with MK. My name is MK. In today's episode, we are going to discuss the total and utter devastation that is the Bitcoin price. Now, if you're somebody that's been stuck holding some large bags of some altcoins, keep in mind it's never a good idea to sell, max pain or fear. It's always best to, if you're going to sell or at least sell some of what you've got, it's best to do it on a bounce. So in today's video, we're going to discuss some potential bounce ideas as far as the S&P 500 goes, which of course would then drag Bitcoin along with it. And if you guys are liking the content, please remember to like and subscribe, and let's go. Now, real quick before I dive into the charts, I wanted to give a quick plug to my brand new Telegram group that I just started. Right now, there's just two groups. I've got an area where you can chat, with the different members in the group. It's just a free group, by the way. We have another group where you can post charts and, altcoin call outs. I'm going to create a couple more in the next few days. One for Bitcoin charts, one for like news and fundamentals and things of that nature. So if you guys would like, go ahead and click those links in the description and come over and chat with us. I think we only have 4 members so far, but I did just create this yesterday. And this is the first time that I'm showing it. And then I'm going to put some, information out on Twitter and things like that as well. So hopefully over time we could build a pretty good little community where we could share ideas. Of course, I'll post my charts and stuff that I, each day that I'm looking at and so on and so forth. So if you feel like it, go ahead and click those links and I look forward to seeing you there. All right, with that being said, we have now arrived on the SPX or the S&P 500. This is the 4-hour chart. And I just wanted to kind of go over a couple of, bounce ideas. Now, I remain still macro bearish as far as the SPX goes, mostly just because it's putting in a series of lower highs and higher lows. And obviously, as we discussed in the previous episode, it has broken to the downside of this potential falling wedge, which, this was a pattern that statistically should have broke to the upside 68% of the time it would. So, what you were at least expecting or hoping for would have been a bounce back up to this trend line at the very least, and hopefully at some point a breakout, retest, push higher. Now, obviously, the rate hikes and the economy stuff is all really the catalyst for what's going on. All the TA in the world can't really help with that kind of stuff. It's ultimately going to go down if the news and the economy is having bearish news come out and inflation and so on and so forth. But what I'm looking for on a macro scale, as we discussed in the previous video, is I would say that we're likely going to trend down over time to this level at the very least, which at this point that would still represent from where we're at now another 10% drop, which, that's pretty significant. Might take it a few weeks to months to do. We could see bounces in between, but that's just kind of where I would be targeting any sort of significant bounce, in my opinion. Anything more than maybe 5 or 3 to 5%. To me, anything over 3 to 5% is probably not going to happen until we get down to at least that level. And the reason that I say that, and I mentioned in the previous video, is this is the first level that looks like it's been interacted with at least for an extended period of time. Obviously, between late August of 2020 until its breakout in November of 2020, you had this rejection, double bottom, breakout, retest, confirming the double bottom down here and pushed higher, right? And then below that level, over time, if things get real bad, this is the level I would really be looking for some, potentially a big bounce at some point. At least it'd be a good area to accumulate some of your long-term holds, whether that's in stocks or crypto or Bitcoin or whatever it may be. And that's just because this level actually was interacted with from early January, or late January, I guess, of 2018. Clear until it officially broke out and pushed higher, in 2020. So you had a couple years almost there of interacting with that area. That being said, there are some ideas for some short-term bounces, which we'll discuss. So again, this is the 4-hour chart, and I've made some vertical lines here, which if we double click and go to the RSI, what these vertical lines are representing is just any time that the RSI level dropped below 30 and between 20 and 30. Now, some of the more significant bounces obviously happen typically closer to 20. 30 is an area to start eyeing a bounce, but you can get some of your worst parabolic drops still in this area. So just keep that in mind as we discuss or go forward in this video. But what I've done is just marked the last few times that it bounced near these same kind of areas as it is now. Like right here, we're sitting at about 29, just under 30, right? I've marked vertically the last couple times that we were near here. Now, these previous two were lower, to be fair. You had 25-ish here. This one, I can't really see with my mark here, but yeah, this one's clear down here at almost 20. And so we'll kind of compare as we get back out here on the chart, what kind of bounces did the S&P 500 have, you know, when the RSIs were that oversold. Here you had about a 3.5% bounce. Here you had, you know, close to a 9% bounce. Here about 6.5%. You know, and back over here you had, let's see, I don't think I actually marked this one, but this would have been just a little bounce of probably a couple percent. Yeah, about another 3%. So, you know, on average, I guess you could say you're looking between like a 3 and, you know, 5% bounce if we want to average all those out when it gets that oversold. Now, again, to be fair, we're not necessarily that oversold yet. And that would leave, you know, open to the idea that, hey, maybe we open up tomorrow, maybe we do bounce right away. Maybe we come back up and we retest this trend line down here, which that would be something like a 3% bounce, I would imagine. Yeah, about 3 to 4%. Maybe over the next day or two, we do push up, you know, test that and then get rejected. But what almost be more likely to me would be that we go one level lower. I'm kind of looking back here, and again, none of these levels of support that we've created over the last couple of months are really very strong support because we just kind of blew through us. You know, stocks were just in a big upward move, you know. But we had some of these areas that we bounced. And if you kind of look right here, this was an area that we bounced at, right? Then we broke out, pushed up to this level. This is the level we just lost right here, right? Broke down out of the pattern. That's what we just retested. So a support resistance flip, that is now resistance. You know, previous support has now become resistance. So if we're going to see a, you know, a major bounce, we need to break back up into this pattern, and then we might be able to get something, you know, push back up to these levels or something. But otherwise, I'd be looking for maybe one drive lower and then a push. But one other thing I wanted to mention that I just kind of noticed just based on the last couple of dips, I guess you could say, or impulse waves, we'll call them. So obviously you had this top down to, I guess you could say, you know, this bottom right here. If you want to, even though there was a move in between there, if you just want to call this a low, high, low, high, low, right? If you go from this top down to that bottom, you're looking at around, you know, 13, 14%, something like that. And this current drop we've had from this top to where we're at now is around, you know, 14, 15%. So, you know, there is ideas that we've kind of made, you know, or maybe due for a bounce. I'd actually, I would be a little cautious right now, mostly because we could go lower on the oversold level. I'm using the 4-hour kind of to gauge some potential short-term trades. But again, I'd like to see it get at least down to about 25 before I start getting a little bit aggressive on some short-term trades. And now that brings us over to the Bitcoin weekly chart. Now, this is actually the same chart that I brought up in one of my previous videos from a few days ago, where we were discussing kind of the length of the cycles and when we thought would be the time to buy Bitcoin. And also just came up with the idea that, hey, it looks like this previous cycle from top to top was 1,477 days. Check this out, from this top to this top over here potentially was 1,435 days. So, you know, some coincidences there. But the reason I bring you back to this chart today is to discuss, as far as downside goes, if you're looking for maybe an area to really see any sort of potential bounce, or at least know that you're hopefully going to have a little bit of a macro bottom. One thing I did notice from this previous cycle of 2017, this is actually back in 2018, sorry, this is after the blow-off top of 2017. This is the weekly chart again. Now this yellow line, this is the 200 EMA, or the exponential moving average, and this yellow one is the SMA. And like I've said in previous videos, the blue EMA just puts a little more emphasis on recent price action. But you can see that back here when Bitcoin had been hanging out forever, holding this support of around 6,000, right? Well, when it lost it over the course of these 2 weeks, the first place that it dipped below it, but the first place it kind of hung out was around the EMA, and then ultimately it went down and tested the 200 SMA before it actually, you know, went sideways for a bit and eventually started to round out and go up again. And if you kind of pull up the date range tool, you can see that from the time that it broke the 200 EMA to the time that it found the bottom was just a few weeks, obviously 20 days or so. But then, you know, it hovered sideways, and you were basically looking at about 120 some odd days So about 4 months before it finally started to make its break back above the 200 EMA. And the reason that I bring that up is if we are going to see more downside, now again, we could see a potential short-term bounce. Doesn't mean it has to copy anything that did in the past. But if you look, we're basically, when we wicked, we didn't wick quite down to it, but we were within, a few $100s of basically testing this 200 EMA, right? So, previously in 2017, it just crashed through it, didn't really hold up as support, but that doesn't mean this time it won't, that it can't maybe see a little bit of a miniature bounce, right, before ultimately losing it, maybe going sideways. But what I would expect over the next few days to weeks, could happen quicker, could consolidate for a bit and happen later, would be that at some point we come down here and we test this 200 SMA, which is the simple moving average, right? If we look at just where those are at right now, you're looking at almost 27K on the dot-ish, just a few dollars over is where the EMA is, that we got pretty close to testing, and where the SMA is around 22,000. So that is where I would eye, midterm to, longer term accumulation zones that I would be targeting. I know in previous video I said that 28,500 is where I would start DCAing, and I am going to start DCAing. I haven't yet. I want to kind of see what Bitcoin does. Really, I want to see what the SPX does. I want to time it a little bit with an SPX bounce, of course, but at any rate, even if you do start DCAing now, as far as your longer term bags, it's still smart to do tiny amounts, because the max pain or how far this can go down can always get a lot worse. And you may even get a wick below that, but hopefully it would be a quick recovery after that. But more or less what I'm thinking is most likely is that we're going to go sideways for just a bit. But if we do have the SPX open up tomorrow and it loses, the support level that it's at again and pushes lower like I discussed at the start of the video, don't be surprised if Bitcoin kind of surprises everyone and at least goes down to around 25K, and if that doesn't hold up, then, at some point over the next few days to weeks, we could see ourselves trend down here and test this 200 SMA on the weekly, which again, right now is sitting at about $22,000. And I said in a previous video from months back, I wish I could find the video, or I probably could if I took the time, but I've always kind of remained of the opinion, this is just my opinion, that we'll never see 20K again. And I think it's just my reasoning behind that was just that in the previous cycles, once we broke a significant all-time high after long periods of accumulation, we never went back to that price. And I've just kind of remained of that same opinion. It doesn't mean it can't happen, though, and I know a lot of people would love to see $20,000 Bitcoin. But unless, obviously with the economy and stuff, anything can happen. But if things can start to, get a little bit better over the coming months or so, I would have a hard time seeing Bitcoin not get scooped up before that. There's going to be a lot of people when this hits the lower $20,000, if it does, that are going to be waiting down there with large buy orders, especially some of the institutions and such. And so I would imagine that if we're going to see any sort of significant bounce or, long sideways accumulation, probably some of your bigger players will be waiting down there between 22 and 25K. Not the most exciting video today, I know, but then again, when Bitcoin's dumping, how can you be excited? Well, that is unless you were trading some of the 3S short tokens that I've been recently discussing. Now, I didn't necessarily post any charts on my Twitter and tell anyone to trade them, so if you missed out on those, in the future, join my Telegram group. We're going to start posting charts in there and some call-outs. The epic one was the Luna short. I actually took profits on that way too early. Ended up making like 50% on what I put in there, but that could have been an insane trade if I left it open. But who could have exactly predicted that the UST or whatever was gonna, break down basically? But at any rate, please remember to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the content. Join the Telegram group. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, and all of that. We'll catch you guys tomorrow. It's TAwithMMK.